Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. There's a rule they drill into you during your first week as a paramedic. Don't assume anything. But what they don't teach you is what to do when everything you know about the human body breaks down in front of you. I'm Daniel Reyes, 29, EMT with New Orleans EMS, third year riding a rig. It was early spring, March 11th to be exact, and I was working out of Station 14 on Claiborne Avenue, night shift. I remember that detail so clearly because it started like any other. The smell of bleach lingered in the station bay. My partner Keisha was heating up leftover jambalaya, and the weather radar was clean. It should have been a quiet night. We got the call at 8:46 p.m. Dispatch tagged it as a possible Code 5 unresponsive person at a shipping warehouse off Almanasta Avenue near the port of New Orleans. That corridor's a mix of old industrial junk and repurposed logistics centers tucked near the river. Nothing out of the ordinary. Homeless guy maybe, or an OD. Happens more often than you'd believe out there. The warehouse belonged to a company I didn't recognize. Virexon Biologics. Brand new sign, industrial grade fencing, tight security cams. The location was off in the weeds, past a closed loading dock and next to a derelict rail spur. We had to push open a steel side door to get inside. There was already a security guard waving us down, flashlight shaking in his hand. He was young, barely 20 if that, pale and sweating. Name tag said H. Cotter. I didn't touch him. He just collapsed, he stammered. There's a weird smell in there, like ammonia and meat. Keisha gave me a look. We're both used to weird. But ammonia and meat, that was a new combo. We stepped into the receiving bay. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell hit me like a punch. Metallic, sweet, rotten. There was a man on the ground near a spill of broken vials and what looked like blood. He wasn't moving. "Sir?" I called, already slipping on nitrile gloves. "Can you hear me?" No response. His eyes were open, milky. Keisha scanned him quickly. Unconscious, no obvious trauma. Skin is cold, like really cold. I knelt beside him and checked his carotid. No pulse. I reached for the defib pads while Keisha started compressions. CPR protocol kicked in, but something was off. His chest didn't rebound right. The sternum felt loose. "Feels like subcutaneous gas," I muttered. "You smell that?" "Yeah," she said. "Body's bloated, but he's not decomposed. We just got this call 20 minutes ago." Then he moved. Midway through a compression, his arm snapped up, not raised, snapped like a reflex, and clamped onto Keisha's wrist. She screamed and tried to pull back, but he didn't let go. I dropped the pads and tried to pry his hand off her, but his grip's strength was incredible. Then he sat up, his body convulsing, mouth wide open. And that's when we saw his teeth. They were red, like someone had been chewing on metal. No pupils, just white sclera. His jaw clicked like it was dislocated. Keisha finally broke free. "Back, back now!" The man lunged, but not at her, at me. He slammed into my chest and I felt us both hit the concrete. The side of my temple rang out like a church bell. I don't remember hitting him. I just remember swinging my trauma shears wildly and the handle cracking against his cheek. That seemed to stun him long enough for us to scramble out. We slammed the warehouse door behind us and barricaded it with a pallet jack. The security guard was already on the radio calling his supervisor. "What the hell is that?" Keisha said, still shaking. "I don't know," I replied, "but we need hazmat. Now." By 9:30 p.m, 3 NOPD units and a fire crew were on site, and so was someone in a plain black SUV with no insignia. He wore a clean polo shirt and a badge around his neck that just said, "Federal Liaison, HHS." I've never seen a response that fast in my life. Someone must have been watching that warehouse before the 911 call even went out. They took our statements, but something felt rehearsed. We were told to submit blood samples for precaution, and then they separated Keisha and me into different ambulances to be observed at Tulane Medical Center. I didn't like it. None of it. Around midnight, they moved me to an isolated room on the 3rd floor. Security posted outside. A nurse came in every hour, drew blood, checked vitals. No one explained anything. By 2 a.m., I was pacing the room like a caged dog. No phone, no contact. Finally, someone in scrubs and a clipboard came in. "Mr. Reyes," she began, "we're going to keep you for observation through the morning. You're showing no acute symptoms, but we want to ensure you haven't contracted." She hesitated. "Contracted what?" I asked. "It's a precaution," she repeated. "There was a contaminant spill at the facility. That's all I'm authorized to say." I tried to press her, but she left quickly. I caught her name tag DR, S. Regan, Idaho infectious disease. That was the moment I knew something was very wrong. This wasn't protocol. The next morning, Keisha wasn't answering my messages. They returned my phone, but all outgoing calls were blocked. Internet access was throttled. Every time I tried to search Virexon Biologics, the connection failed. I wasn't allowed to leave until 3 p.m. when a Department of Health van escorted me home. Not a word about what happened. I was advised to take 72 hours off work and limit public interaction. I should have taken a flight out that night. That evening, I got a message from a friend who worked at NOPD dispatch. She texted, "Hey, was that you at the Almanasta call? NOPD just flagged a violent patient from that warehouse. One officer got bit. No report filed. They're burying it." "Burying what?" I replied. No response. By nightfall, the first reports started leaking on local scanner groups. Multiple assaults reported near the port. Man in hospital gown seen attacking security personnel. Code blue at Tulane ER requesting lockdown. Keisha still wasn't answering. I drove straight to her apartment in mid-city, but no one answered the door. I noticed something then. Her dog, Mako, was barking from inside, frantic and alone. She wouldn't leave him like that. I went back to Station 14 that night. The garage doors were locked. Unusual. A temporarily closed notice had been zip-tied to the handle. Then I saw the ambulance. Our rig, Unit 1427, parked along the side of the building, half hidden under a tarp. I lifted the cover and found the interior sealed with industrial-grade plastic sheeting. Someone had gutted it. Biohazard stickers on the dash. This wasn't just contamination. They were erasing something. Around midnight, I made my mistake. I went to the warehouse alone. I parked down the block, near a shipping container yard. The Virexon building was now cordoned off with portable floodlights and 2 unmarked vans. Black SUVs were parked around back. I crept around the far side near the rail spur, climbed up onto a storage container, and peered inside through a cracked window. There were bodies, 4 of them, sprawled near the spill site. Hazmat teams were cataloguing samples. One of the corpses still twitched. I watched one of the suits inject something directly into its spine. Then it moved. I saw the entire spine arch like it was being shocked, not spasm-controlled movement. It twisted its neck and locked eyes with the window. Even at that distance, I felt it. I jumped down, heart in my throat, and didn't stop running until I reached the car. Back home, I threw every light on. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, but the truth was, I'd seen someone, come back from biological death, and the people in charge weren't trying to contain it. They were studying it. But the first real outbreak wasn't at the warehouse. It happened 36 hours later, inside the ER at Tulane. The patient was a young man who'd been admitted after disorientation and collapse. No ID, no next of kin. They placed him in holding under observation. A nurse came in to check vitals and found him standing, head tilted unnaturally to the side. He didn't respond. When she touched his arm, he grabbed her throat and bit through her trachea. Security responded. 2 injured. By the time the ER went into lockdown, 3 patients had turned code black. The hospital was sealed. But that wasn't enough. Within hours, local police began responding to reports of aggressive individuals near Loyola Avenue, pedestrians tackled, officers bitten, ambulance stolen. I watched it all unfold on the scanner feed. The usual 10 codes and calm dispatcher voices dissolved into clipped, panicked bursts, units screaming for backup, EMTs begging for help, officers going off script and describing what they were actually seeing. One called in, voice shaking, and said, "They're not stopping. I shot him twice in the chest and he kept coming." Then the transmission cut out. That's when I turned off the scanner. Not because I didn't want to hear it, but because I already believed him. It was happening. I locked every door and window in my apartment, then dragged my tool chest and kitchen chairs in front of the front door. Not because I thought I was next, but because I remembered what I saw at the warehouse. I remembered the twitching bodies, and most of all, I remembered the cold, dead man who clamped onto Keisha like a machine. There had been no panic in his face, no hesitation, only target fixation. Around 4:20 a.m., my phone buzzed with a restricted number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mr. Reyes," the voice said. "This is Dr. Reagan. We met at Tulane." She didn't wait for me to speak. "You need to come in," she said. "Now." I stayed quiet. "We have reason to believe you may have been in contact with an experimental bioagent that's no longer under containment. The patient you were exposed to, Subject Alpha, was infected with a synthetic neuroparasite derived from modified Cordyceps militaris, a fungus previously studied in entomology. But this version, Daniel, listen carefully, this version reanimates post-mortem motor function. It overrides cerebral death. She trailed off. I think she realized she was saying too much. "How many people are infected now?" I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. "Officially, under 20, she said. "But that number isn't accurate." Of course it wasn't. "I'm not coming in," I told her. "Not unless you tell me what the hell is really going on." There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "It was a trial. The pathogen was under corporate contract with DARPA through a Virexon subgrant. Its intended application was battlefield casualty mitigation, keeping soldiers' bodies mobile long enough for remote retrieval. But there were complications." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the only sound I could make. "You created zombies," I said flatly. "We didn't," she said. "Virexon did. We just studied what was left after they shut the trial down. Patient 0 wasn't supposed to wake up. He was in deep refrigeration. How did he get out?" "We don't know." "Then you've already lost containment." She didn't argue. "We'll be sending CDC responders to intercept you at your address," she said. "Please comply. If you feel sick, if you experience aggression, photophobia, or motor tremors, call 911 and tell them code indigo, subtype 4. You'll be triaged for treatment." She hung up. I didn't wait for CDC responders. I grabbed my backpack, stuffed it with water, a small med kit, and every spare pair of nitrile gloves and masks I had left. My Glock 19 went into the waistband. 2 spare mags. Not because I wanted to use it, but because I'd heard the officer on the scanner say 2 rounds didn't stop his attacker. By the time I stepped outside, the sky was grey with pre-dawn. The streets looked deceptively normal. A jogger passed me near the corner of Iberville and Rocheblave, just a guy in earbuds. But as he disappeared around the bend, I realized I'd just witnessed the end of normal life. He didn't know. Most people didn't. Not yet. I headed to the one place where I knew there would be answers. The downtown EMS station, across from the Claiborne overpass. Station 1, Central Hub. I knew it would be active if things had escalated, and it was close enough to the Superdome and University Medical Center that I might find someone from Emergency Management or Fire Command still on comms. But as I approached, I saw flashing lights, not from an ambulance, but from a state police cruiser. It was parked sideways, blocking the entrance. Officers in N95 masks and tactical vests were inside, watching the street. One was on a radio. and the other had a clipboard. Behind them, I saw 2 EMTs being screened, thermometers to their foreheads, bags opened and inspected. It wasn't a station anymore, it was a checkpoint. I turned the corner before they saw me and ducked into the alley behind the Ace Hotel. I needed a new plan. Then I remembered someone. If anyone would have first-hand access to what was going on inside the hospitals without being locked down, it was Benji. Benji Chen was a telemetry technician at UMC. I met him 3 years ago during a night call. Smart guy, former Navy corpsman, turned civil medicine after his discharge. He had a side hustle repairing outdated med equipment and a paranoid streak a mile wide. I called him. He picked up on the third ring. "You saw the scanner?" he asked immediately. "Every word. You need to get off the street. They just locked down Tulane's north wing. Nobody's allowed in or out." "What about UMC?" "Still functional, but we've got people showing up with missing ears, facial trauma, disoriented, delusional, naked, like walking in off the street and collapsing in the lobby, and some are biting." He said the last part softly, like he wasn't sure he should say it aloud. "Are the doctors responding?" I asked. "They're pretending it's psychosis, saying it's a bad batch of K2 or bath salts. But some of these patients aren't high. Their vitals are dead, man. One of them coded and stood back up during intubation." He paused. "I've seen it. That's not medicine. That's a virus." "Fungus," I corrected. "Synthetic." There was silence on the other end. "Come to my place," he said. "Bring whatever you've got. The hospital's gonna fall. It's just a matter of time." Benji lived uptown, near Audubon Park. I made my way west through side streets, avoiding main roads. Sirens echoed across the city, not constant, but more than I'd ever heard at once. Multiple fire stations were already out of service. Emergency dispatchers were clearly overwhelmed. I saw a city bus abandoned sideways across Carrollton Avenue, windshield shattered. Graffiti had already started appearing, hastily sprayed messages like, "Help us," and "Stay inside." The streets were breaking down faster than I thought possible. When I got to Benji's, he was already packing gear. He handed me a mask and gloves and closed the blackout curtains. He had a whiteboard set up with hand-drawn maps of hospital layouts, radio frequencies, and a list titled Primary Vectors. Tulane, UMC, the prison infirmary, and a site I didn't recognize. NG 7, Navy Yard Clinic. He circled that one in red. "What's NG7? I asked. He looked at me sideways. "That's the real Patient Zero site. Naval Research Outpost turned biotech incubator, tied to Virexon through a shell company, Dendera Systems. My cousin worked janitorial there last year. Said they were testing nerve agents on human cadavers. Weird tech. Military ghost budget stuff." "How far's that from here?" "Across the river. West Bank. It's sealed now. Army rolled in last night. Quietly." That's when I knew this was bigger than an accident. This had been growing behind the scenes for months. Benji had rigged a private comms relay through an old ham radio setup. He'd been picking up encrypted bursts all morning, signals he traced to the Louisiana National Guard. They were mobilizing in sectors, focusing on transport hubs, port access, and the main causeways. But they weren't establishing shelters. They were establishing exclusion zones. If that wasn't confirmation of spread, nothing was. Then we heard the chopper. It wasn't a newsbird or a medevac. It was a Black Hawk, low and fast, heading northeast toward the airport. 2 others followed it in formation. Military hadn't officially entered the city, but they were here now. We turned on the emergency broadcast channel, static, then a digital tone, then a voice, FEMA-coded, reading a public safety announcement. "This is a federal emergency message. All citizens are advised to remain indoors. Civil authorities are responding to an airborne biological incident. Shelter in place. Do not attempt to travel unless instructed by emergency personnel. Further updates will follow." Benji muted it. "That's it," he said. "Once they start broadcasting FEMA codes, it means continuity of government protocols are in play. They're not saving the city, they're preserving command structure. The truth was unbearable, but we both understood. Whatever had escaped that warehouse had spread. Virexon's experiment had broken into the wild, and now the city of New Orleans had become a test site, and we were still inside the perimeter. We gathered what we could: medical supplies, radios, old MREs from Benji's Navy stash. He handed me a utility tomahawk, something he claimed was standard in the Corps. He'd already wrapped the handle in paracord and fitted it with a loop. "Quiet, easy to clean, never jams," he said. I didn't argue. We moved fast. No headlights, no main roads. Benji had an old Nissan Xterra with blacked-out plates and a 2-meter band antenna mounted to the roof rack. He drove like he was back in Fallujah, scanning every intersection twice before we crossed it. The streets were still eerily calm on the surface. No fires, no bodies in the open. But the city had that tense, unnatural silence that happens before a hurricane makes landfall. The air smelled like hot concrete and mildew, and somewhere distant we could hear the low, steady beat of helicopter rotors circling over the river. As we rolled toward University Medical Center, the radio crackled again. Dispatch was in freefall. A 10:33 had been called, emergency traffic only, but the channel was packed with crosstalk and confusion. One officer screamed that a man had ripped his partner's throat out. With his mouth, another was begging for backup at South Claiborne and Tulane Avenue, just 2 blocks from UMC. His voice cut out mid-sentence. The roads closer to the hospital were scattered with signs of panic. Abandoned cars blocked intersections. A stretcher, empty, lay in the middle of Galvez Street like it had been dumped in a hurry. A single sneaker rested beside it. The ER parking lot overflowed with city ambulances, but many had their rear doors open, some with IV lines still dangling from gurneys. The entrance was dark. No lights inside, no automatic doors, just broken glass glinting in the floodlamps. Benji parked 2 blocks out, near a shuttered laundromat, and killed the engine. "Front's compromised," he said. "We go in through receiving. It's underground, near the morgue entrance." He knew the layout cold. He'd worked this place for 6 years. That gave me some comfort, but it didn't last long. We moved in with masks on and headlamps off, using only pen lights with red lenses to minimize reflection. The loading ramp was half closed, but there was enough of a gap to slide under. The moment we dropped into the tunnel, the temperature shifted, cooler, damper, and much too quiet for an active trauma center. A gurney had been overturned against the wall. Drag marks streaked across the floor in multiple directions. One trail ended at a steel door marked "Morgue Access Authorized Only," smeared with what looked like old blood. Benji froze beside me and flicked off his light. I heard it too, shuffling, then a low, wet inhale. He reached for the tomahawk on his belt, and I drew my Glock, holding it low. No movement ahead. But the sound came again, closer this time. Something breathing raggedly, like broken lungs still trying to pull air. Then the silhouette appeared at the far end of the hall, barefoot, hospital gown torn open, arms limp at its sides. The figure tilted its head at an unnatural angle, almost like it was listening to the darkness. We backed toward the stairwell. It didn't charge, not yet. But as soon as my boot hit the first step, it moved. Fast. It ran like a sprinter, limbs whipping, shoulders forward. Benji didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, swung once, and the tomahawk caught the thing full in the face. Bone cracked. It crumpled silently. He looked at me. No hesitation. They only stop if you break the brain. Anything else, and they just get back up. That was the new rule. We reached the 2nd floor, using the staff stairs. The lights were flickering on emergency power, casting a dull amber glow over the linoleum. UMC was a modern facility. Card access doors, secure wards, thick bullet-resistant windows, but none of that mattered anymore. We moved past a pediatric observation ward, empty save for a single overturned wheelchair and a scattering of child-sized hospital gowns still on hangers. The sense of abandonment was suffocating. Benji led us into the telemetry wing. It had been locked down with fire doors, but someone had propped one open with an IV pump. Inside it was dark and warm, the air filled with the chemical stink of cleaning solution and blood. A monitor still beeped from one of the side rooms. Flatline. Long, continuous tone. That was worse than silence. It meant someone had tried to save a patient before everything fell apart. Then I heard a sound that didn't fit. Something faint and rapid. Knocking. We followed it down the corridor, past the labs, until we reached an equipment closet with a yellow mop bucket jammed under the handle. From inside, we heard a woman's voice, whispering, breathless. Benji yanked the bucket free and cracked the door. Inside was a young woman in blue scrubs, clutching a blood-streaked clipboard. She had a compression bandage around her thigh and tear stains down her cheeks. Her badge read, S. Chen admitting. Sarah, Benji said, and dropped to his knees beside her. You're okay. His sister. She looked up at him, then at me, then back again. They're everywhere, she said hoarsely. We tried to lock the trauma wing. Someone opened it from the inside. I don't know if it was a patient or one of the nurses. I heard screaming. Then the backup power failed. I've been in here for 3 hours. We helped her up and wrapped her leg with clean gauze. It wasn't deep, just a long scrape from crawling under debris. But she was dehydrated and near collapse. Is there anyone else left? I asked. She nodded, barely. Dr. Varga, he's in ICU. He was trying to coordinate evac, said they were going to bring people up through the heliport, but I lost contact. Benji looked at me. Roof access is locked behind admin, he said. We'll have to cut through pediatrics again and up the west stairwell. I didn't like it. That would take us past the behavioural unit, and those patients had already been flagged earlier on the scanner for agitation and violent outbursts. But we had no choice. We moved quickly, keeping quiet, avoiding glass and dragging sounds. Sarah pointed out a side hall that would get us around the burned-out hallway where the fire team had failed containment earlier. There were still bodies there. 2 paramedics, 1 officer, and someone in a white coat. Their faces were shredded. None of them had weapons. We reached the stairwell near the admin wing. The door was ajar. Benji went in first, tomahawk raised. I followed, then Sarah. The stairwell was echoing slightly. Every step we took bounced sound down the shaft. I kept looking up toward the 6th floor, listening for movement. Halfway up, we heard metal scrape above us. Someone, or something, was already on the stairs. We froze. Then a body came tumbling down, head over heels, limbs flailing, until it crashed hard 2 flights below us. It didn't scream. It didn't cry out. It just hit, rolled, and started to rise again. I shot it twice in the chest before I remembered that didn't matter. Benji vaulted the rail and brought the tomahawk down, crushing its skull. Blood smeared across the wall in a wide arc. We didn't wait. We sprinted the rest of the way to the roof door. It was locked with a magnetic panel. Dead. Overrides at the nurse's station, Sarah said. ICU hub. I held position while they moved toward the override. That's when the noise started. Feet. Dozens of feet. Slapping unevenly against tile. A chorus of grunts and hisses echoed up the hall. The infected had found us. Benji triggered the door release. I yanked it open and shoved Sarah through first. Then I turned and saw them. At least 12, maybe more, pouring out of ICU. All in hospital garb, all marked with trauma, blood down their gowns. One still had a neck brace dangling from its jaw. I raised my Glock and fired, walking backward onto the rooftop. The rounds hit center mass. Useless. I took a breath, aimed for the face, and dropped 2 with headshots. Benji slammed the door shut behind us and jammed the lock with a metal rod. For a second, we all just stood there, breathing hard, hearts pounding. The door rattled once, twice, then held, but it wouldn't for long. It bowed slightly under pressure, a sickening flex that made the hinges groan. Somewhere inside, a dozen infected were pressing forward with single-minded intent. No coordination, no panic, just relentless pressure. That was their tactic. Keep pushing, never stop. The air on the rooftop was heavy and wet. the breeze rolling in off the Mississippi not doing much to cool the heat rising from the tar paper under our feet. The sun was beginning to crest over the skyline, casting long shadows across the downtown district. From up here, we could see the shape of the city unraveling. Smoke billowed from at least 4 different fires. The Crescent City Connection Bridge was gridlocked. Dozens of vehicles jammed together like a frozen river. No movement. Sirens howled somewhere to the west, but no pattern, no rhythm, not emergency response, just panic. I scanned the roof for anything useful, maintenance doors, ladders, signage. Nothing but a rusted service hatch chained shut and a few HVAC units humming quietly like nothing had happened. Sarah collapsed against the wall of the elevator housing, head in her hands, trying to stay quiet, but losing the battle against sobs. "They left us," she said quietly. "They said they were coming back. Vargas swore they'd come back." Benji was already at the edge of the roofline, pulling out his field glasses. He scanned the horizon like he was still deployed, measured, controlled. No wasted movement. He gestured northeast. Chopper on the far side of Rampart. Might be National Guard, might be private. Hard to tell at this distance. But they're flying low and moving slow, like they're searching. "Too far for us," I said, "unless we get off this roof and somehow cross 30 blocks on foot." Benji turned to me. "You got a better idea?" I didn't. We pried the service hatch open with a crowbar Benji had rigged into his gear. It led to a shaft that ran down the east wall of the building, narrow, poorly lit, and just barely climbable using rusted steel rungs that had probably not been maintained in 20 years, but it was our only way down. Benji went first, then Sarah, then me last. Every creak felt like it would give way under our weight. The air in the shaft was close, metallic, filled with the smell of mold and something worse, old disinfectant and rot. Halfway down, we heard the door on the roof burst open above us. The infected had broken through. They didn't follow immediately. Maybe they couldn't find the hatch. Maybe their behavior wasn't intelligent enough to track descent paths, but we weren't going to wait to find out. We reached the 3rd floor ledge and dropped into a maintenance room, kicking aside mop buckets and coils of old tubing. From there, we moved fast, ducking into a fire escape stairwell that had somehow remained untouched. We exited 2 floors down into the old administrative annex and came out near a shuttered ambulance bay that opened onto Gravier Street. The outer doors had been smashed, bent steel and busted glass, but the exit was clear. We stepped out into a different world. The streets were no longer quiet. Screams echoed down alleyways. Car alarms blared in succession like a ripple of panic. A thick haze hung in the air, lit orange from the fires creeping westward across the lower city. Trash and medical waste scattered everywhere. IV bags, trauma shears, bloodied gauze. A fire hydrant had been torn off, flooding the road, and amid the spray, we saw 2 bodies. One moved. It wasn't alive. We kept to the walls, avoiding open areas. Every block was a new nightmare. A city bus with shattered windows and claw marks down the side. A pawn shop completely emptied of weapons. A Walgreens burned to the frame, shelves charred and dozens of prescription bottles melted into the tile. Near Basin Street, we saw what had once been a FEMA checkpoint. Barricades overturned, a portable command post trailer on its side, the words "Quarantine, no entry" spray painted in white across the roadway. Blood smeared the lettering. Sarah started to falter. Her limp was worsening. Benji and I rotated between supporting her, while the other kept watch. It was slow going. Too slow. We reached the outskirts of Armstrong Park by late afternoon. The chopper Benji had spotted earlier was gone, but the area was quieter. Fewer signs of movement. Maybe the infected had pushed further into the French Quarter, where crowds had been thickest. Bourbon Street would have been ground zero for exposure. Packed bars, tourists shoulder to shoulder. No one would have seen the first bite. No one would have known to run. We camped in the ruins of an old rehearsal hall used by a brass band collective. The front was boarded up, and the back had a lockable storage room filled with dusty equipment cases. It wasn't secure, but it was shelter. We ate from Benji's MRE stash. I barely tasted it. My mouth was dry, my jaw tight. I kept thinking of Keisha, of the warehouse, of the man who should have been dead but moved like he was alive, and of the doctor who called me and said the word cordyceps like it was just another line in a research grant. That night, the city changed. We heard it from across the park, multiple explosions, short bursts of gunfire, then the unmistakable roar of rotor blades right over our shelter. A loudspeaker barked out commands in garbled English and Creole. This is a federal emergency response team. All civilians must evacuate toward designated assembly points. Do not engage infected. Avoid contact with bodily fluids. Proceed on foot to the Superdome for processing. Processing. That word didn't sit right with any of us. We decided not to go. Not yet. The Superdome had already been designated as a fallback site once in history, and we remembered how well that had gone. But more than that, we didn't trust what was waiting there now. The military response hadn't come to protect civilians. It had come to control the perimeter, and we weren't interested in being part of another experimental quarantine. Benji spent the rest of the night listening to open ham frequencies. That's when we caught something strange. An encrypted broadcast, weak but traceable, originating from a facility north of Baton Rouge, near a decommissioned army chemical testing site. The transmission repeated every 5 minutes. NG7 active, initiate echo protocol, non-standard physiology confirmed, awaiting extraction. Echo protocol. I remembered that from Reagan's call. Benji pulled out a flash drive and loaded up a document he'd found weeks earlier. A leaked DARPA white paper on neurobiological warfare testing in controlled urban environments. The paper referred to NG7 as a bioethical testing platform. The implication was clear. The outbreak wasn't an accident. It was a simulation. The warehouse hadn't been a breach. It had been a release. We had to leave the city. Benji knew a route, an old fire road that passed beneath the Pontchartrain Expressway and curved along an abandoned freight track toward Harahan. It was dangerous, no cover, exposed rail, but better than fighting our way through checkpoints or trusting military shelters. We waited until the next morning, then moved. By then, the city was in full collapse. Fires raged unchecked. Distant sirens had gone silent. Most of the infected we saw weren't moving in packs anymore. They were scattered, slow. Some collapsed entirely in the streets like their bodies had finally burned out. But others still moved fast, and some were adapting. We saw one that had used its own forearm to break a storefront window. Another had climbed partway up a fire escape before losing balance. They weren't just twitching drones, they were learning. That was what chilled me most. By the time we reached the edge of the city, Sarah's fever had worsened. Her leg was inflamed, and she was disoriented. We debated stopping, but there was no one left to help us. No clinics, no clean rooms, no triage teams. The hospitals were silent shells. We pressed on, crossing the spillway on foot. At one point we passed a boat ramp where dozens of corpses lay half submerged. Some had zip-tie cuffs, some wore biohazard suits. None of them were military. I think they were the cleanup teams. We reached the outskirts of St. Rose by nightfall. There was no more scanner traffic, no more FEMA broadcasts, just distant thunder and the hum of insects reclaiming what was left. We made camp in the second floor of an abandoned bait shop near the river. That night, Sarah finally slept without tremors. Maybe the infection wasn't fungal after all. Maybe it was selective or strain-specific, or maybe it was just luck. I took first watch. Benji sat beside me, sharpening the edge of the tomahawk he'd carried since the hospital. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was earned. We'd both crossed a line. We were survivors now, not responders. And the rule they never taught us, the one every EMT, every nurse, every cop on the street should have known, was simple. When the dead don't stay dead, you don't wait for orders. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.